fear of God would introduce you to knowledge. The fear of God would introduce you into understanding. As a matter of fact, the fear of God is one of the sevenfold spirits of God that governs the throne of God. And when you begin to entertain the fear of God, it adjusts a lot of things in your life. There are certain things you would do because you fear him. There are certain things you would do because you will not do because you fear him. Now, the difference between this being one who has a reverence, fear for God, and the one who is afraid of God is that, when you are afraid of God, let me use this as an example. At a time in my life, I was afraid of my father spanking me. So I didn't want to be caught. But I did not have reverence for him. Meaning that as long as I could get away with it, I would do what I wanted to do. But when I came into the reverence for him, I did not do it whether he was present or not, whether I will be caught or not. So I pray that you will grow in your reverence for God. And then that moves into every area of your life. Some of you don't do things because I am not there. Yeah? Some of you don't do things because I am there. But can it be, don't do the things you don't want to do in my presence, whether I am absent or present? Is that clear? Then you have really shifted into the reverence part. So my presence does not change your behavior. So it's not, you don't raise your hands because there's a crowd. You raise your hands because you reverence God. So can we begin to practice that? Can we begin to be conscious of the fact that I need to make the shift? All right, so when you do that, there are certain levels of inconsistencies that will stop. There are levels of sin you will never entertain again. You know why? You reverence God. Now, sometimes we forget that God is omnipresent. There's this story of this young man who got a guest, a lady, and he wanted to mess with her, and so he closed the door. The lady did not panic. She just was cool. She waited till he did all the things he wanted to do, making sure that the place was secure, no one was there. Then she said, "Have you locked God out now?" See, your understanding that God is omnipresent changes the way you act. So I want to encourage us, when you come into the congregation of the righteous, or when you come into the place of fellowship with God, can you yourself make yourself aware that God is here? You see, we don't call him, we come to meet him. So when you walk in, can you make yourself aware that you've come before him? Present yourself before God. Now, if you haven't done it, can you do so? Yeah, can you salute him? It's not the worship team that makes God come here. It's not the preacher that makes God come here. He says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, he is present. Now, it means that it gives us the privilege for his manifestation. And once you begin to do that, it recalibrates how you function. Now, it's important that we also notice that the way we relate with one another influences our behavior. Okay? So I just want to say this. Anyone who would lead you into sin does not really love you. Or anyone that you follow into sin, you really, you got the whole picture wrong. Anyone who is supposed to be representing God ought not to lead you into sin. Now, Paul, in 1 Corinthians 4, I want us to look at it. I think I have a lot to say. So, 1 Corinthians 4, 13 to 17. Now, the Corinthian church was one of the bodies that Paul really invested in. Yet, they were the group that were complaining more about Paul. You know, they were fussing about him. They were, had questions about who he was even to them. So he had to try and sort it out in their mind. Right. Can I say to some fathers here, listen, your investment in those that God has allowed you to father is not based on their applause. Sometimes you will not be appreciated, you will not be valued. You just take a look at God. You know, when I get a little bit rubbed the wrong way, I remember that God has many children. All right, and when I say God has many children, I'm talking about it covers a gamut of characters. Yeah. And he still says that he's their father. Yeah, so every now and then, some will spit on us. Every now and then, some would despise us. You know, as a matter of fact, some of them would never return. And I remember when God taught me this, that, there are people who, they may leave, but you make sure they don't leave your heart. Yeah. So I learned to pastor people who were not in my congregation. Yeah. All right, so if you found 1 Corinthians 4, so this is what Paul is dealing with. And he said, being defamed, we entreat. All right, so Paul is this, if you read the verses before, he's just describing how he's learned to come in the opposite spirit. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, I'm reading 13. All right. So being defamed, we entreat. We have been made as the filth of the world and the offscoughing of things until now. I do not write these things to shame you, but as my beloved children, I warn you.